The royal court was larger than anything most beings had ever seen. Tall, golden pillars stretched high into the air, glowing softly with warm light. The polished floor reflected every movement, like a mirror. The room was filled with silence, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was heavy, waiting. Leaders from many worlds had gathered. Some were tall and armored, some had glowing eyes, some were covered in strange skin or metal. All of them were powerful. All of them were watching. At the center of the court stood the throne. It was not just a seat, it was a symbol of absolute power. Whoever sat on it would rule over countless planets, armies, and civilizations. Today, that power would belong to one person, Princess Lyra. She stepped forward slowly. Her armor shined under the golden light. It was carefully designed, both beautiful and strong. Every step she took echoed across the silent hall. Her long dark hair rested over her shoulders, and a delicate crown sat on her head. Her face looked calm, but her eyes told a different story. There was something hidden inside them, something heavy. Everyone expected her to walk straight to the throne. Everyone expected her to sit. This was her destiny. She reached the final step. She stopped. The silence grew deeper. A few whispers started in the crowd. Why had she stopped? The king, her father, watched closely from behind. His expression was sharp, serious. He was waiting. Lyra looked at the throne. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, something changed. She turned, not toward the throne, but away from it. The whispers became louder. Confusion spread across the court. What was she doing? Slowly, Lyra stepped down from the platform. One step, then another. She walked away from the throne and toward the lower part of the court, toward the prisoners. Among them stood a human. He looked completely out of place. He wore simple, worn clothes. His hands were restrained. His body showed signs of past battles. Compared to the powerful beings in the room, he looked weak, small, unimportant. Most of the court barely noticed him before, but now, all eyes turned to him. The guards reacted immediately. Their weapons lit up with energy. The air grew tense. The king's voice suddenly broke the silence. Lyra! His voice echoed loudly. Return at once and take your throne. But Lyra did not stop. She kept walking. Step by step, she moved closer to the human. The human looked confused. He did not understand what was happening. His eyes followed her every move. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. Some of the alien leaders stood up slightly, watching more closely now. This was no longer a normal ceremony. This was something else, something dangerous. Lyra finally reached him. She stood right in front of the human. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The human looked into her eyes. There was no fear in hers, only quiet certainty. The king shouted again, louder this time. You will obey. But Lyra ignored him. She slowly turned and sat down, not on the throne, but beside the human. The entire court froze. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt as if time itself had stopped. The guards did not know what to do. The leaders from distant worlds stared in disbelief. This had never happened before. This was not just unexpected. This was impossible. A princess refusing the throne, choosing to sit beside a prisoner, a human? The human himself looked completely shocked. He glanced around, trying to understand. Then he looked back at her. Why? He asked quietly. His voice was soft, almost lost in the silence, but Lyra heard him. She did not answer. She simply sat there beside him, as if that was where she truly belonged. The king stood up from his seat. His face was filled with anger now. You shame this empire, he said coldly. Still, Lyra did not move. She did not look at the throne again. She did not look at the king. Her choice was already made. The whispers turned into loud voices. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some were afraid, because they all understood one thing. This moment would change everything. A single choice had shaken an entire galaxy, and no one knew what would happen next. The silence did not last long. It broke like glass. Voices rose across the royal court. Some were angry. Some were shocked. Some did not even try to hide their fear. The golden walls that once felt calm now seemed heavy and cold. The king stepped forward. Each step he took echoed with power. Enough, he said, his voice deep and controlled. The room slowly quieted again. His eyes were locked on Lyra. You will stand, he ordered. You will walk back, and you will take your place on that throne. Lyra did not move. She sat beside the human as if the rest of the world did not exist. The human, Daniel, swallowed slowly. He could feel every eye on him. Every powerful being in that room was now watching him like he was a mistake that needed to be erased. He leaned slightly closer to Lyra. "You should go," he whispered. This is not worth it." Lyra finally spoke. Her voice was calm but clear. "It is." Daniel frowned, confused. "You don't even know me," he said. Lyra looked at him. "I know enough." Before he could ask more, a loud sound echoed. The king struck the floor with his staff. Energy spread across the room like a wave. "This human," the king said, pointing directly at Daniel, "is nothing, a captured soldier from a weak world. He has no value here." Daniel looked down for a moment. He had heard those words before, many times. But Lyra spoke again. "He has more value than you see." The court reacted immediately, gasps, anger, disbelief. The king's expression darkened. "Explain," he demanded. Lyra stood up slowly. Now all attention was on her again. But she did not return to the throne. She stayed beside Daniel. "There was a battle," she began, "at the edge of our outer systems. Some of the commanders in the room stiffened. They remembered. It was chaos. Our forces were losing. I was separated from my guards." Her voice remained steady, but her eyes showed memory. "I was injured, weak, alone." The court listened now. Even the king remained silent. Lyra continued, "I fell in a destroyed zone. Fire everywhere, ships falling from the sky." She paused for a moment. "And then, he found me." She looked at Daniel. "He did not know who I was. I was not a princess to him. I was just someone in danger." Daniel shifted slightly, uncomfortable. "You saved me," Lyra said. The words landed heavily in the room. A human saving a princess? Impossible. "He fought enemies stronger than him," she continued. "He could have left. He could have survived alone." Daniel shook his head slightly. "I didn't think like that," he muttered. Lyra gave a small nod. "That is the point." She turned back to the court. "He stayed. He protected me. Not for reward, not for power, but because it was right." The room was silent again, but this silence felt different, heavier, more thoughtful. The king narrowed his eyes. "One act does not change what he is," he said. Lyra did not hesitate. "It changes everything." The tension returned. The king raised his hand. Guards immediately stepped forward, weapons glowing brighter now. "Remove the human," the king ordered. The guards moved toward Daniel, but Lyra stepped in front of him. "Stop." Her voice was sharp now. For the first time there was force in it. The guards hesitated. They looked at the king. The king's face showed anger, but also something else. Uncertainty. "Daughter," he said slowly, "you stand against your empire, against your blood." Lyra met his gaze. "I stand for what is right." The court reacted again. Some leaders whispered to each other. Some watched with growing interest. Because this was no longer just about a throne. This was about belief. The king lowered his hand slowly. "Then you will choose," he said. His voice was cold again. "Right now." He pointed toward the throne. "Your empire." Then he pointed toward Daniel. "Or him." The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Lyra did not look at the throne, not even once. She turned slightly toward Daniel. He looked at her, still unsure, still confused. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. Lyra gave a small, calm answer. "I already did." Then she faced the king. "I choose him," the words echoed across the court. And in that moment, everything changed. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire court had stopped breathing. Then the reaction came. Loud, chaotic, uncontrolled. Voices rose from every corner of the hall. Some shouted in anger. Others spoke in shock. A few remained silent, watching closely, trying to understand what this meant. The king stood still at first. Then slowly, he began to walk forward. Each step was heavy. Each step was heavy. Each step carried authority. When he reached the center, his presence alone forced the noise to fade again. "You have made your choice," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. That made it more dangerous. Lyra did not step back. Daniel stood beside her, still unsure of everything, but he did not move away either. The king raised his hand. "Then you are no longer my daughter." The words struck harder than any weapon. A quiet wave of shock moved through the court. Lyra's face did not change, but for a brief moment, her eyes softened. Still, she said nothing. "You are no longer a princess," the king continued. "You have no claim to the throne, no place in this empire." The golden crown on Lyra's head suddenly began to glow. Energy formed around it. Then, slowly, it lifted from her head, floating in the air. before returning to the king's hand. The symbol of her power was gone. Gasps filled the room. It was done. Lyra was now nothing in the eyes of the Empire. The king turned his attention to Daniel. "And you," he said coldly, "should never have existed in this moment." The guards moved again, this time faster, weapons fully active. The threat was real now. Daniel's body tensed. He looked around quickly. There was no escape, no plan, just danger from every direction. But before the guards could reach him, Lyra stepped forward. She placed herself between them. Her voice was calm but strong. "If you want him, you go through me." The guards stopped, not because they were ordered to, but because something in her presence made them hesitate. The king's eyes narrowed. "You have no power now," he said. "No title, no command." Lyra stood firm. "I don't need it." The room felt different again. Something had changed, not in power, but in feeling. Some of the guards looked at each other. They remembered her, not as a princess, but as a leader, someone who had fought beside them, someone who had protected them. One guard slowly lowered his weapon, then another. A quiet shift began. The king noticed. His expression hardened. "Stand down is not your choice," he said sharply. But the hesitation had already spread. Not rebellion, not yet, but doubt. And doubt was dangerous. Daniel looked at Lyra. "You really gave up everything," he said quietly. Lyra did not look back. "Yes." "Why?" he asked again. "This time," she answered, "because power without meaning is empty." Daniel said nothing. For the first time, he began to understand. The king turned away slightly, thinking. Then he spoke again. "Very well." The words were slow, controlled. "You both will leave." The court reacted in surprise. "Leave? That was not expected." "You are exiled," the king said. "From this empire, from all its worlds." His eyes returned to Lyra. "If you are ever seen again, you will be treated as enemies." The message was clear. This was mercy, but also a warning. Lyra nodded once. "I understand." The king raised his hand again. This time the guards stepped back. A path opened, not wide, but enough. Lyra turned slightly toward Daniel. "Can you walk?" she asked. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "I'd been through worse." Together, they started moving. Step by step, they walked across the massive hall. No one stopped them, but everyone watched. Some with anger, some with confusion, some with quiet respect. As they reached the end of the court, Daniel looked back once. The throne was still there, empty, waiting. He looked at Lyra. "You really didn't even look at it," he said. Lyra kept walking. "I already made my choice." They stepped beyond the doors. The massive gates closed behind them with a deep, final sound. And just like that, they were no longer part of the empire. Outside, the world felt colder, larger, unknown. Ships moved in the distant sky. Stars stretched endlessly above them. Daniel took a deep breath. "So," he said, "what now?" Lyra looked up at the stars. For the first time, there was no crown on her head, no title, no power. But there was something else. Freedom. "We move forward," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. Behind them, an empire had been shaken. Ahead of them, a new story was about to begin. The air outside the palace felt different, colder, wider, real. For the first time in her life, Lyra stood without guards, without rank, without a crown. The golden walls behind her no longer protected her. They only marked what she had left behind. Daniel stood beside her, looking up at the sky. Ships moved far above, silent shadows crossing the stars. "So, we just walk?" he asked. Lyra gave a small nod. For now. They began moving across the long stone path that led away from the royal court. The ground was smooth, but beyond it, the land changed quickly into rough terrain and open space. No one stopped them. No one followed. But that did not mean they were safe. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke again. "You don't think they'll come after us?" Lyra did not answer right away. "They will," she said finally. "Just not yet." Daniel let out a slow breath. "That's not very comforting." Lyra glanced at him. "You're still here." He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, I guess I am." They reached the edge of the royal grounds. Beyond it, the world felt less controlled, less perfect. The lights were dimmer. The structures were older. Fewer guards. Fewer rules. Lyra slowed down. "This is where control weakens," she said. Daniel looked around. Feels more honest. Lyra almost smiled. As they moved deeper into the outer district, the atmosphere changed. Beings of different species walked through narrow paths. Traders, workers, travelers. No one bowed. No one cared who Lyra used to be. To them, she was just another figure. For the first time, she was invisible. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the moment, a sharp pulse, then another. Daniel turned quickly. What was that? Lyra's expression changed. Trackers. Daniel's body tensed. Already, Lyra nodded. Not official. Hunters. That was worse. Before Daniel could respond, a blast hit the ground nearby. Dust and energy burst into the air. People around them scattered in panic. Move, Lyra said. They ran. More blasts followed, hitting walls, tearing through the path behind them. Daniel looked back briefly. 3 figures moved through the chaos, fast, precise, armored in dark suits with glowing lines across their bodies. Elite hunters. They don't look friendly, Daniel said. They're not, Lyra replied. They turned into a narrow passage between tall structures. The space was tight, filled with pipes and shadows. Another blast hit the entrance behind them. Closer this time, Daniel grabbed a metal rod from the ground as they ran. Lyra noticed. That won't stop them. Daniel held it anyway. It makes me feel better. They reached a dead end. Daniel stopped. Great. Lyra looked around quickly. No clear exit. The sound of footsteps approached. Fast, precise. The hunters entered the passage, 3 of them. Weapons raised. End of the path, one of them said. His voice was cold, mechanical. Lyra stepped forward slightly. They were not ordered to do this, she said. No, the hunter replied. But we were allowed. That meant one thing. They were acting for reward. Daniel stepped beside Lyra. Stay behind me, he said. Lyra looked at him, surprised. They are trained killers, she said. Daniel tightened his grip on the rod. So am I. In my own way. The hunters attacked. Fast. One moved forward, striking with a glowing blade. Daniel reacted on instinct. He dodged to the side, barely avoiding the attack. He swung the rod, hitting the hunter's arm. The impact was not strong, but it disrupted the motion. Lyra moved next. She was fast, precise. Even without her title, her training remained. She struck one hunter's weapon, pushing it aside, but they were outmatched. The third hunter fired a pulse shot. Daniel saw it coming. He jumped in front of Lyra. The blast hit him. He fell back hard against the wall. Daniel! Lyra shouted. The hunters moved closer. Slow now. Confident. Daniel struggled to breathe. Pain spread across his chest, but he forced himself up. You're really starting to make this a habit, he said weakly. Lyra stepped forward again, but this time, something changed. Daniel stood beside her, even injured, even outmatched. He did not step back. The hunters paused for a moment, confused. Why was he still standing? Why was he not afraid? Daniel looked at them. You guys ever fight someone who doesn't care about winning? He asked. They did not answer. He gave a faint smile. That's your problem. Then he moved again, not with perfect skill, not with power, but with pure determination. Lyra watched him, and in that moment, she remembered exactly why she made her choice. Not because he was strong, but because he refused to fall. And sometimes, that was stronger than anything else. Daniel moved first, not fast, not perfect, but without hesitation. The nearest hunter raised his weapon, expecting a direct attack. Instead, Daniel shifted his movement at the last second. He slid to the side, using the narrow space to his advantage. The glowing blade missed him by inches and struck the wall, sending sparks into the air. Daniel used that moment. He swung the metal rod again, this time aiming lower. The hit connected with the hunter's leg joint. The impact was not strong enough to break it, but it forced the hunter off balance. Lyra reacted instantly. She stepped forward and struck the hunter's arm with precision. The weapon slipped from his grip and fell to the ground. 2 enemies left, but the other hunters adapted quickly. The second one raised his arm and fired another pulse shot. Daniel saw the light building. Down, he shouted. Lyra dropped just as the blast passed over her, hitting the wall behind them and shaking the narrow passage. Dust filled the air. Vision became unclear. The third hunter moved through the dust like a shadow. Silent, deadly. He aimed directly at Lyra. Daniel saw him. There was no time to think. He pushed himself forward, ignoring the pain in his body. He grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground and threw it with all his strength. It hit the hunter's helmet, not enough to stop him, but enough to delay him. Lyra used that single second. She moved fast, closing the distance. Her strike hit the hunter's chest plate at a weak point. The armor cracked slightly and the hunter stepped back. Now they were not just defending. They were fighting back. The first hunter recovered and picked up his weapon again. "All targets resisting," he said in a cold tone. "Permission to eliminate." A faint signal echoed from his suit. Permission granted. The air changed instantly. No more hesitation. They were going to kill them now. Daniel wiped the dust from his face. His breathing was heavy, uneven. His body was already reaching its limit. But he stood anyway. Lyra stepped beside him. "They will not stop," she said quietly. Daniel gave a tired smile. "Good," he replied. "Neither will we." The hunters attacked together this time. Faster. More aggressive. The narrow passage became a storm of movement and energy. Daniel dodged one strike, but another hit his shoulder, throwing him against the wall. Pain shot through his arm, but he forced himself up again. Lyra fought with precision, blocking and striking, but even she was being pushed back. They were losing ground. Step by step, the hunters moved like machines. No fear, no emotion, only purpose. Daniel looked around quickly. No exit, no help. Then his eyes caught something. A weak section in the wall behind the hunters, cracked from earlier blasts. An idea formed. Risky, very risky. He leaned closer to Lyra. "Trust me," he whispered. Before she could ask, Daniel charged forward again, this time directly at them. The hunters reacted instantly. One raised his weapon to fire. Daniel did not dodge. At the last second, he grabbed the hunter's arm and forced it to aim at the cracked wall. The blast fired. The wall exploded. Light burst through as the structure broke open. A path. Daniel did not let go. He used all his strength to push the hunter forward into the opening. Lyra understood immediately. She grabbed Daniel and pulled him back, just as the damaged wall collapsed further. Debris fell. Dust filled the space again. The hunters were separated, trapped on the other side of the broken structure. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then distant sounds of movement returned. They would not be trapped for long. Lyra turned to Daniel. "You planned that?" she asked. Daniel shook his head slightly. "I hoped it would work." Lyra looked at him for a second. Then, for the first time since leaving the palace, she smiled. "Come," she said. They moved quickly through the new opening. The path led into a darker area of the outer city. Fewer lights. Fewer people. Safer for now. Daniel slowed down after a while, holding his side. I need a break," he said. Lyra stopped. She looked at his injuries. "You should not still be standing," she said. Daniel gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, I hear that a lot." They found a quiet corner between old structures. For a moment they rested. No guards, no throne, no hunters, yet just silence. Daniel looked at her. "You gave up everything," he said again. Lyra looked ahead, toward the distant stars barely visible between the buildings. "No," she said softly. "I chose something better." Daniel followed her gaze. For the first time, he believed that maybe she was right. But far above them, hidden in the sky, ships were already moving, watching, tracking. And this time, the next attack would not be small. It would be the Empire itself. The silence in the dark corner did not last long. High above the city, something moved. At first, it was only a shadow crossing the stars. Then another, and another. Large ships. Not small hunter crafts. Not mercenaries. These were imperial vessels. Daniel noticed first. He looked up through the narrow gap between the buildings. "Lyra," he said quietly. She followed his gaze. Her expression changed immediately. "They came faster than I thought." The ships hovered in the sky, silent and still. Then beams of light began to scan the city below, sweeping slowly across buildings, streets, and hidden paths. "They're searching for us," Daniel said. "Yes," Lyra replied. "And this time, they won't stop." A deep sound echoed across the area, a broadcast signal. The king's voice filled the air. "Lyra." The single word carried power. Every being in the district froze. "You have made your position clear," the king continued. "Now understand mine." The ships above shifted slightly. Energy gathered beneath them. "You will return," the king said, "or this entire district will be erased." Daniel's face hardened. "He's threatening everyone," he said. Lyra remained still. Her eyes scanned the streets. Civilians, workers, families. None of them had anything to do with her choice, but they would pay the price. "That's how power works here," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Not anymore." Lyra looked at him. "What are you thinking?" Daniel stood up, ignoring the pain in his body. "If they want you, we don't hide," he said. "We move." Lyra frowned slightly. Move where? Daniel pointed upward, to them. Lyra stared at him for a moment. That is not a plan, she said. Daniel gave a small smile. It's the only one we've got. Before she could argue, a loud explosion shook the ground nearby. One of the outer buildings collapsed. The Empire had started. People began to run. Panic spread quickly. Lyra made her decision. All right, she said. We move. They stepped out from their hiding place and into the chaos. Dust filled the air. Sirens echoed across the district. More blasts struck distant structures, sending shockwaves through the streets. Daniel and Lyra moved against the crowd, toward the center, toward the danger. Ships won't land here easily, Lyra said as they ran. Too crowded, too unstable. Then how do we reach them? Daniel asked. Lyra pointed ahead. A tall structure rose above the surrounding buildings, a communication tower. If we reach that, she said, we can send a signal, force them to respond. Daniel nodded. Then let's go. They pushed forward. The path was not easy. Falling debris blocked parts of the street. Panicked civilians moved in all directions. The sky above grew darker as more ships arrived. Then, more figures dropped from above. Imperial soldiers, not hunters this time. Full units, armed, organized. One of them spotted Lyra. Target confirmed, she shouted. Weapons turned instantly. Daniel reacted fast. Move. They turned into a side path just as energy shots struck the ground behind them. The soldiers followed. Precise, relentless. They're closing in, Daniel said. Lyra looked ahead. We're close. The tower stood just ahead now. Tall, damaged, but still standing. They reached the base. A narrow entrance led inside. They rushed in. Darkness. Only emergency lights flickered. Daniel leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing hard. Tell me this thing still works, he said. Lyra moved toward a control panel. It has to. She activated it. The system responded slowly, damaged, but functional. Outside, footsteps echoed. The soldiers had reached the entrance. We don't have much time, Daniel said. Lyra worked quickly. I'm opening a direct channel, she said. If I can reach the main ship, the door shook as blasts hit it from outside. They're coming in, Daniel warned. Lyra pressed the final command. The system connected. A screen flickered to life, and then the king appeared, his face calm, watching. I knew you would not run forever, he said. Lyra stepped forward. Call them off, she said. The king's expression did not change. You still think you have a choice. Daniel stepped beside her. No, he said. But they do. The king looked at him. For a moment, there was silence. Then Daniel spoke again. You destroy this place. You prove her right, he said, that your power means nothing. The king's eyes narrowed slightly. You speak boldly for someone so weak. Daniel did not back down. Maybe, he said. But I'm still standing. Lyra looked at Daniel, then back at the screen. This ends now, she said. Outside, the door finally broke. Soldiers rushed in, weapons ready. But inside the tower, everything had already changed, because now, this was no longer just about escape. This was a message, and the entire empire was watching. The soldiers rushed into the tower. Their weapons were raised. Their movements were fast and perfect. Do not move, one of them shouted. Daniel stepped slightly in front of Lyra, not because he could stop them, but because he would not step back. Lyra did not move either. Her eyes stayed on the screen, on the king. You see this, she said calmly. You see what your command is doing. The king's face remained still. This is necessary, he replied. Outside, another explosion shook the tower. The ground trembled. Dust fell from above. People were still out there, running, hiding, dying. Daniel clenched his fists. This is not control, he said. This is not control, he said. This is fear. The soldiers inside moved closer. Last warning, one of them said. Surrender now. Lyra slowly raised her hand, not in surrender, but to signal them to stop. Something in her presence made them hesitate again. Even now, without a crown, she still felt like a leader. The king noticed it too. Why did they hesitate? He asked quietly. No one answered. But the truth was clear. Respect does not come from power alone. Lyra took a step forward. Her voice grew stronger. You taught them to obey, she said, but I taught them to think. The words echoed. Even the soldiers felt it. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel looked at Lyra. This is your moment, he said quietly. Lyra nodded once. Then she faced the screen again. I will return, she said. Daniel looked at her surprised. The soldiers reacted instantly. Weapons lifted again, but Lyra raised her voice. Alone. The room froze. The king leaned forward slightly. You would leave the human? He asked. Lyra shook her head. I would protect him, she said. By ending this. Daniel stepped closer. No, he said. That's not how this works. Lyra looked at him. If I go, they stop, she said. Daniel's voice hardened. And you trust that? Lyra paused. For the first time, there was doubt. Daniel continued. You told me something, he said. Power without meaning is empty. Lyra watched him. Don't go back to that, he added. The soldiers shifted slightly. The tension was building again. The king spoke once more. Time is ending, he said. Choose. Lyra closed her eyes for a brief second. Then she opened them again. Clear, focused. No, she said. The word was simple, but it changed everything. The king's expression finally shifted. Just a little. You refuse? He asked. Yes, Lyra said. Not just the throne. Not just the empire. She stepped forward. I refuse this system. Silence. Even the soldiers did not move now. You rule through fear, she continued. You destroy to control. You silence anyone who stands differently. Her voice echoed through the tower, through the open channel, through every ship above, but that ends now. Daniel stood beside her, not as a protector, not as a prisoner, but as someone equal. You think you can change this? The king asked. Lyra did not hesitate. I already have. Outside, something unexpected happened. The ships above began to shift, not to attack, but to reposition. Signals moved between them, voices across channels, confusion, doubt. Some of the soldiers inside the tower slowly lowered their weapons. One stepped back, then another. The king noticed. His control was slipping, not because of force, but because of belief. Daniel looked at the screen. You can't stop this now, he said. People saw it. Lyra added softly. They felt it. The king remained silent for a long moment. The entire empire was watching, waiting. Then finally, he lowered his hand. Outside, the ships powered down their weapons. The sky grew quiet again. Inside the tower, the soldiers stepped back completely. No one attacked. No one moved. It was over, but not in the way anyone expected. Lyra took a slow breath. Daniel looked at her. So, what now? He asked. Lyra looked out through the broken wall. At the city, at the people, at the stars beyond. We build something new, she said. Daniel smiled slightly. Together, he asked. Lyra looked at him. Yes, not as princess and human, not as ruler and soldier, but as two people who chose the same path. Behind them, an empire had changed. Ahead of them, a new future had just begun.